Welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2021. E3's over? No, not. It's never over. It's a state of mind. And the game. And we have two.
Ice cream van, ice cream van!
Ice cream van.
Yay!
I was gonna try and power through it just because I was like, hey, we'll have some nice backing music. It'll be lovely. But that is Persia. Welcome, Persia.
Hello, and that was my alarm telling me it's time to work.
Persia has her own entrance music. Tamor, do you have any that won't get us copyright strike on YouTube?
Sadly not, but I do now have, you just mentioned it, but now I have the Adult Swim TikTok trend music stuck in my head. So if I could magic some...
Have exclusive trailers, exclusive play. We've got interviews with huge developers, and now we can finally say, because our schedule is out there. So we have a very, very exciting day ahead. We've got things like an interview with Lloyd Ferguson, Diablo. I spoke to the team behind Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. But what else? We've got Back for Blood, Persia. You interviewed the team at Turtle Rock, Far Cry, a ton of stuff to look forward to. Tam, I'm going to throw it to you. What are you most excited about that we're going to be talking about today?
We managed to get an interview with Bethesda's very own Pete Hines, and honestly, like, the interviewer that we got for it, not the best. You know, we were stuck. We needed someone like just kind of last minute, and admittedly, he's not the best at interviewing people. Didn't come very prepared. I think he kind of like woke up and just appeared and was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So it's kind of interesting, but like it's a good interview overall. I would just say, like, if you see an interview from that guy again, maybe stay clear.
I don't even know how to respond to that. But it's I haven't watched it yet, but I have seen you interview Pete. Oh, this interviewer interviewed Hines before, and it's always been a good time. Uncle Pete always be a game, and Bethesda have had one hell of an E3 with that Starfield reveal finally, as well as Doom DLC coming to Switch, and of course Redfall, the game that we are the most excited for. Persia, what about you? Because you've done a bunch of interviews for this show for this year's Playful. What have been some of your highlights?
Well, I'm definitely excited for Back for Blood. I played Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 way back in the day, and I don't think this part made it into the interview, but I was pretty excited that back then during Left 4 Dead, I literally only had 2 friends, so filling out a full team was impossible. But now I can fill a full team, and I'm excited to get into Back 4 Blood and like play it again. And to be fair, I feel like I'm a much better gamer now than I was back then. So I'm like, I am ready to play some Back 4 Blood. So I'm really, really looking forward to that one. Actually, the PvP looks really good. Looks super interesting, and that little esports side of me is like, I see potential here.
I was gonna say, and like I'm excited about it because I didn't really play that much Left 4 Dead. I did play a whole bunch of Evolve though, Turtle Rock's last game, RIP Evolve. It had so much potential. I know how much everyone loves Back 4 Blood, how much everyone loves Left 4 Dead, so I'm very excited to see how Back 4 Blood turns out. That's not the only thing we're gonna have today. We've also rounded up a bunch of our industry friends to come and join us to discuss the big reveals from this year's E3. So coming up at 10 a.m. PT, I'm going to be chatting with Tim Gettys from Kind of Funny, Stephanie Ijoma from Nene Saga, and Jake Baldino from Game Ranks, which is going to be a lovely time. And then this afternoon, Paris Lily, who's hosting the Xbox showcase tomorrow, Steve Swan from Able Gamers, and Naomi Kyle. So that's just today as well. We've got another
more time kind of reflecting on the stuff that really stuck out for us, and given that the crew that we've put together, I know there's going to be a bunch of different picks. It's not just all going to be the AAA games. I bet you will have a few indie unexpected picks in there as well. So I'm excited to watch your interview with our pals from around the industry, because then I get to kind of like focusing on games that I need to pay attention to, and then I'm excited to hear about the folks that I'm interviewing as well, and what they've been kind of caught on over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because E3 is no longer just, God, remember when it was just like Monday to Thursday? And nowadays, everyone's kind of playing. Those days are gone.
The good
There's
old
like
days.
announcement after announcement.
Well, it comes
So
during
coming up,
a year of presentations as well. Like everyone suddenly realized they can do a Nintendo Direct, so everyone is doing it throughout the year. I remember after last E3, I was like, oh my god, please stop with these Nintendo Direct style presentations. Everyone was at it. So it feels like we've been doing micro E3s all year, and it's culminated in this E3. And then once once it's over, straight back into it. We'll have more EA stuff happening, and it's never going to stop. E3 is eternal and infinite.
the E3 hype train just continues. It's like the train from Snowpiercer. It just keeps going. I haven't watched the TV show of that yet, but I did love the movie. We should probably talk as well a little bit about what's coming up this morning. So you've got us for a few more minutes, and then we are going to go to, I believe it is the Diablo interview. So our very own Michael Hyam, if you've been watching, first of all, any piece of like GameSpot content, you'll have probably seen or read words from Michael Hyam. He is one of the greats, and he has been the GameSpot presence at E3 home base all week. So you'll have seen him on the live streams with Jackie Jing, Greg Miller, and Golden Boy. And he got to sit down with Rod Ferguson, formerly of Gears. He had to change that Twitter username. He used to be Gears Viking, but now he's over at
Just could not handle it. It was rough. And you know what? It's not the game's fault. It was my equipment's fault. You know, totally fair. But now we're in a different ball game now. So I'm actually pretty excited. And I've also been playing like similar games, kind of like Path of Exile. So I am very interested in that style of game. And I'm excited now that I kind of have equipment that I can actually play it easily on. So I'm excited to see what's coming, and like hopping into a new Diablo game like with my best friend also sounds super exciting. And I think that's a big theme behind a lot of the games I'm interested in, you know, coming out, is that the potential to play with friends and to like do more and to also like enjoy these IPs that I didn't get a chance to enjoy when they first came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, Tam, we had the GameSpot showcase yesterday, and you picked a lot of games. You picked all the games for that. It was a collaboration between us and The Mix. And certainly coming together, obviously Play for All, that is a huge theme of the show that we put on. Very quickly, before we throw over to Michael and Rod Ferguson, this interview is primarily about Diablo 2 Remastered. What are your... Resurrected, sorry. What are your fond memories of Diablo 2?
Oh, my fondest memory of Diablo 2 is like forgetting that the world exists and allowing myself to just become an absolute husk of a human being while playing that game, which I think is a common experience for Diablo. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get real into this devil game and play it all the time, and I definitely did that. It's one of those games that is kind of like a defining moment where it's you are like, yeah, I'm very into video games, and that was it for me. Like, it's when you play Diablo for far too long and you realize, oh, I woke up and now I'm gonna go to bed, and I played Diablo in between. So I'm excited to get back into that game and relive it and remind myself how much of a obsessive gamer I am when it comes to Diablo. So the nostalgia is gonna hit hard for me, I think.
I am, for one, I'm just impressed that you told that whole anecdote about how much you played Diablo 2 and didn't mention Poop Sock once, which is genuinely where I thought you'd be going.
I'm saving the Poop Sock for later on today. There's another opportunity. You'll see it. You'll hear it.
And so then after the Diablo interview, we're going to come back to us and we'll chat a little bit about it, and then we'll go to the Pete Hines interview. So with that, let's roll VT. I've always wanted to say that. Here's Michael and Rod Ferguson.
Nothing but illustrious guests here on GameSpot's Play for All, our charity drive and gaming showcase for the summer. I'm really excited for this segment because we have someone who shaped the Gears of War franchise and who is now shaping the Diablo franchise. Rod Ferguson, executive producer on the Diablo franchise. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's been pretty wild to see that transition, because we know we've been keeping up with your work back when you were on Gears, but now Diablo is in such a fascinating time for the franchise, because you have D4, we have D2R, we have Immortals on mobile. So, but I think, let's get out of the way. I know you can't say much, but the folks need to know. They're gonna roast me if I don't ask you. Is there anything you can share or update us on with regards to Diablo 4?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, since we did our announce, the dev team has been really focused on making sure we're communicating with the players. And so we've been putting out this quarterly dev blog, and we even had sort of a video one, if you will, or a visual one at BlizzCon recently. So our next one's coming. So at the end of this month, we're going to have a new dev blog. It's going to be really focused on character and character art. So we're really excited to share that with players. So that's the next big thing from P4.
All right, sweet. Now we got that out of the way. We can focus on Diablo 2 Resurrected.
What are we here to talk about? I have no idea.
Oh, wow. Peep the shirt. So yeah, we're here to talk specifically about Diablo 2 Resurrected because we are recording this before the Xbox showcase, but I'm going to ask you ahead of time, how does it feel to be on that stage now, showing off what you're working on? It is kind of weird though, because obviously Gears is so tied to Xbox, and now that you're like, yo, I'm with Blizzard now, and you're back on the Xbox stage, but how does it feel to represent Diablo on that stage now?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a little surreal, honestly. Like I was thinking about that because I've been on the actual stage at E3 a number of times as part of being with Microsoft, and around this time we'd be like, you'd have had to go and get your clothes because you always have to buy new wardrobe to be on the stage. You'd be doing rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, and just trying to make sure that what you had was going to be great. And so it's been kind of funny to not have that process going on and not being part of that anymore. But it's really exciting to be able to bring something new to that. I mean, Diablo, it's been traditionally, at least in its long history, especially in terms of Diablo 2 Resurrected, has been a PC-only kind of franchise for a while until Diablo 3 came to console, and I actually like it better on console personally. But it's strong on console there, and so one of the things I'm really excited about is being able to bring Diablo 2 to a whole new audience, a whole bunch of players who never had necessarily, from an age perspective, they may not have been born when this game came out, or they're just not PC gamers and they didn't play it on PC. And so the fact that we're bringing this game back in a really modern, contemporary way for new players on console, and we get to do that and announce our ship date, show off what the cinematics look like, and do that all on the E3 stage the virtual E3 stage is really exciting.
So Diablo 2 Resurrected, like you said, is coming out September 23rd. That's really soon, all things considered. And there's going to be a beta sometime in August. And we've had the technical alpha, which I played a ton of. A lot of memories were unlocked during playing the technical alpha. It was really wild to see how much it's been revamped. So since the technical alpha, what kind of feedback have you seen? What kind of changes are you making as you get much, much closer to the actual release date and going closer to a more open beta?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. It was one of the things we really wanted to do, was to make sure that we were having the game, available for player feedback. We wanted to hear what the players thought, and that was like that single player alpha was really a big moment for the team because, we've been making certain decisions around what do you keep parity in the original and what do you improve, and we're kind of making those choices based on our philosophy and what we think is the right choice. And when we put it out there for alpha, we got people loved it. It was the response has been fantastic, similar to your response, but we do get feedback, which is great, and we're listening to that. As we look at different things around big things around, hey, this is a little bit, like for example, that you spawn in before the load screen is gone, and so you can be killed when you spawn in. Like that's a big thing. We have to fix that, right? And then there are small things like, hey, I find the lightning too thin, or the blizzard isn't blizzardy enough, and so it's a wide range of feedback, and we're able to sort of focus on it and really listen to what the players wanted. And we even took it a step further. One of the things I really wanted to do in the alpha is partner with able gamers, and so we were able to get disabled players to play as well and give us feedback. I mean, it's hard when it's a 21-year-old game you're building on top of. You can't necessarily do everything you want to do, but we just wanted to understand, like, are there blockers, or how can we help? And so we've been really looking at what we can do with that feedback as well.
Sweet, that sounds great. I mean, that kind of goes into my next question too, is trying to determine what you can and cannot change, or what you want and don't want to change. So kind of, how do you determine that as you step into a new role, you're got your hands on something that is very precious to a lot of players?
Yeah, I mean, our key word was authenticity. Like, how do we keep the experience authentic? And so there are things about the game that can make it challenging in a good way. For example, you get a quest and it doesn't tell you, now go here to do the quest. Like, you have to go and discover and explore, and we think that's a big part of the game. And then there's things like the fact that you don't have a shared stash amongst characters means you have to create mule characters, and you're dropping stuff on the ground and relogging in really quickly, and it's not, it doesn't add to the experience. It's just part of what the technology was like back 21 years ago. So we've been really focused on making the game more accessible, and that's from how to play, from those types of things I just talked about, the workarounds that people had to do from bringing it to console, and even some accessibility features as well. But we really been focused on parity, and that's one of the nice things is that the original Diablo 2 game, that 2D sprite-based game, is underneath the covers. It's the engine that's driving all the gameplay decisions. Did you kill that monster? Did you get that loot? All that is being driven by the original game. And what we've done is put a layer on top of it, which is this 4K HD surround sound layer that sort of takes all that engine and represents it in a higher fidelity. And so it has been tricky, but we wanted to bring quality of life. We know that people wanted things like a shared stash, and we know that they wanted things like auto gold pickup the way a contemporary game would. Yeah. But there were other things that we were just like, oh, that's a bridge too far. That's simplifying the game, not making it easier to play. Like we want it easier to play, but not easy, if you know what I mean, or easier. Yeah. And so it's been a lot of that. But how we give people more access and make it and onboard them in a better way.
Yeah, I think when I covered the technical alpha, I was like, oh, damn, I got my ass kicked. Like, I don't know how to control mobs anymore. Like, oh, I forgot how to do that, and I learned real fast. I can't think of Diablo 2 playing it any other than keyboard and mouse. And then for D3, I can't imagine playing it other than, like, a gamepad. And like those two games just, like, feel so different in my mind. And it really stood out when I played the D2R technical alpha. But how have you adapted the core of D2 onto a console experience? Because there's a lot of, like you said, the basis of D2 is still the core thing that's running this game. But I can imagine like things like inventory management and how you like control mobs, how you fire off skills and get away and move and pick things up in the environment. How have you, like broadly, like how have you just made this a sensible console experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a focus on understanding what the console and the controller is good at, and understanding that, again, it's one of those things where we try some things and we go, that's too far. Like we had for a while when you plugged in a controller, your inventory auto-sorted for you to try to keep, so you didn't have to do the inventory Tetris, and it was like, oh, this kind of breaks the game. This is kind of inventory Tetris is part of the game itself.
Yeah.
And so finding creative ways to allow you to move things between, let's say, your inventory and your belt, or your inventory and your stash, and shortcuts, and the way that it feels in terms of like some skills are dependent, like Sorcerer's Teleport, it depends on where you click to. And so now we're having to sort of predict, a certain range of distance and those sorts of things based on how you use the controller. But it fundamentally is just a change from you're telling the character where to go to you are the character giving in, the direction through the sticks. And that was the team, the dev team just did a fantastic job. It's like the very first time we implemented controller support, it was already very playable, and it felt it felt great to play. Especially as, like I said, I'm similar to you. Like I played D3 on a gamepad mostly, and so I was kind of interested to be like, how does this going to feel to control it, because it's not built from the ground up for this, and so how is it going to work? And it feels great. Like especially like ranged attacks feel really good, melee attacks feel really good. It's just stuff like why auto gold pickup works so well. It's like one of the things going in and trying to identify every single piece of gold and picking them up, with every button press was just too much for like. And so there's certain things that get turned on as an option. Now those things you can turn off, and that's a lot of things that we did too. Is like when we made a choice, we sometimes made it an option where maybe somebody loves auto gold pickup and maybe somebody doesn't, and so they can choose whether to turn it on or turn it off based on their playstyle. But yeah, it was really just trying to make it feel more native, even though that it wasn't. Like you don't want it to feel like, oh, this is a PC port, and therefore it feels kind of like, I don't know, clunky and those sorts of things. And so we've dedicated a lot of effort in trying to make that feel smooth and to feel like you have precision, and to feel like you can do what you want to do, and it feels like a great console experience.
Moving to controller, had it any effect on how you perceive the balance of certain classes, if at all?
No, I mean, it all, I mean, like I said, there are certain things where you would have a certain precision about where you could do certain things, but it's the same thing for Diablo 3, is that certain builds, like certain barbarian builds, are easier with mouse and keyboard than they are with controller, as an example. So one of the things we really, because we were trying to deliver that authentic experience, we just didn't want to mess with balance. That, we know that there are certain balance issues, and potentially like the, people call the Hammerdin with the Paladin with, is a strong character build currently in the build. But that idea that we were changing a bunch of things visually, we didn't want to get into changing the balance of how the game plays too, because it felt a little too risky. And so everything we did was very focused on keeping the balance as it is.
So this open beta that's coming up is going to be the time you get to kind of test out multiplayer, because I know technical alpha was single player only. Got our feet wet there, but I'm kind of excited to jump back into D2 multiplayer. I remember my friends back in high school doing a lot of. They carried me often, and I expect them to do it again this time around. But yeah, what can we expect from the multiplayer aspects in the beta, or even the full game?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the part of we're getting ready with September 23rd is our release date. You know, we're going to do this August multiplayer beta, and it's really, you know, you want to test out all the systems. We're going to this sort of, we're going to the BattleNet, you know, global BattleNet servers, and we're going to have all these Blizzard servers running, and we want to be able to see, okay, let's put a large load on it, let's test our services, let's test our servers, and get people playing that experience they didn't get to play in the technical alpha. So some great things. One is, you know, obviously, again, the big difference is multiplayer versus single player, so the beta is unique for that. And so you can either bring people together and play co-op up to 8 people, or play PvP if you want to. And then it's on console, so this will be the first time people get to experience D2R on console, which will be a big moment. And then we're expanding the classes, so we're allowing people to play 5 classes instead of the 3 in alpha. So we've added the Druid and the Paladin to the mix, and so again, you can go in and play as a Druid or Paladin and see how they play as well.
I've heard that you are a big fan of the redone cinematics. So all of the cinematics have been like revamped. That's kind of wild. Can you take me behind the scenes in terms of how the team did approach that, or even like just pulled it off?
Yeah, I mean, it was really around, you know, when we look at the philosophy of the game, the philosophy is really about it's a remaster, not a remake. Like we're taking the purity and the authenticity of the original, and we want to just elevate it with, you know, with sort of 4K art and the surround sound and such. And so, but when we looked at the cinematics, like a lot of remasters will take the cinematics and say, oh, let's just up-res them, or do something that, because you don't necessarily have the source material anymore, and you can't just kind of work from what you had years ago. And we just felt like when you think about D2R or D2, it's such a genre-defining game, and it had such a meaningful moment in time 20 years ago that we felt like it really deserved to have the cinematics remade. And so we went into it going, okay, well, we don't want to change how we tell the story, and we don't want to change what the story is, because people talked about like, oh, could you shorten it, or could you give a different perspective, or could you? And we were like, no, we want to be faithful to the source material, but what we want to do is bring it forward again in a really modern way. And so we went in and worked with. We have a story and franchise development team called SFD at Blizzard. That they're the ones who work on all the amazing cinematics that Blizzard makes. And so we partnered with them, and we were able to work with another partner called Access. I don't know if you know of them, but I worked with them on Gears of War as well as part of our Hivebuster trailer. But they all came together, and we're going to remake this shot for shot in the highest CG that we can do in the time that we have, and you get a taste of that in the trailer. You get to see little snippets of it, and I can't wait for people to see more, because everyone did a phenomenal job. You know, like again, I feel like it elevates D2R because the quality of the storytelling now, like you get all that detail that you maybe didn't see before. Were those beetles on the floor, or were those spiders on the floor? Like, no, they're beetles. You know, they're beetles. Like I can see that detail, and I can see, you know, all the different things that are happening and sort of the storytelling that's going on in the environment and on the characters and their faces and their emotions that they're having. And so I love it, and I think it really takes it to another place.
I have one more question, and it's kind of a broad one to hit to you, but. You've moved to Blizzard fairly recently, and it's still kind of wild to think that you are representing Diablo now. But what have been the biggest changes going from, you know, shaping Gears of War and now shaping Diablo? Like how you work, what you work on, the things you focus on in game development, how you handle your teams. What has changed for you, man?
I think the number one thing has got to be the pandemic. I only had 8 days in office when I first arrived, and then we're all working from home. And where I'm used to being, you know, walking the halls and standing up in front of the team and working with people one-on-one and such, that everything is through, you know, a video camera now, and it's been surreal to do that. And I've been with them now 15 months, and it's like I said, except for 8 days, it's all been through a camera. And so it's really changed how I try to lead. It changes how I communicate. It changes a lot of things. And so it's also been interesting because we're with Gears, you know. I joined Gears back in 2005, and I was basically there pretty much the whole way. And I was kind of the person who was the keeper of the lore and the keeper of the franchise. I was the creative director of it, and so I was the one teaching, and others were learning. And now I'm coming into a franchise that I've loved, since the original D1, and having played it for all this time. But still, I'm coming in as a student that I don't know all the lore, and I don't know every secret and where every skeleton is kind of in their closet around, like how the game works and the way that certain details about certain systems. And so I've had to come in much more as a student of the game than I was when I was the head of the coalition, sort of running Gears of War. So that's been really interesting. It's part of what it's what helped inspire me to do this was just it's a new challenge, getting to work on one of my favorite franchises, and getting to work with the caliber of talent I get to work at Blizzard. So it's been interesting. Like I said, doing it from my dining room in North Carolina is a strange place to be trying to lead 3 Diablo games to ship, but it's been exciting.
I appreciate the time that you gave to us to talk about Diablo and your work and your career. Is there anything else that you want to share before I let you go here?
I think the one thing that I really want to call out too around the beta is just that the pre-order is happening. So that's one of the big things is that with our announcing our ship date at the E3 event, we can now take pre-orders for console in terms of and what that also, those pre-orders allows you to get into the open beta sooner. So we're actually going to do the beta in 2 phases. And so there'll be a pre-order access phase and then an open phase. So I highly recommend, and we have a really cool, if you pre-order the game, you'll actually get a transmog in D3 that'll allow you to change your barbarian, both male and female, to look like the Diablo 2 barbarian, which I think is really kind of cool to have that iconic barbarian look in D3. So that's coming, and like I said, and getting access to the pre-order beta would be a great time to get in, and like I said, get to play the 5 classes, get to see the game, and get to play early with your friends.
Rod Ferguson, thank you so much for your time, man. Take care. And Diablo 2 Resurrected is coming soon. Y'all should peep that too. And thank you all for watching this segment here on Diablo 2 Resurrected. I want you all to stick to GameSpot.com because we have so many more interviews, gameplay reveals, trailers, and live streams because we are raising money for able gamers. And I hope to see you all around next time.
Thank you very much, Michael Hyam, who has been absolutely killing it at E3 this year. What a legend. Talking to Rod Ferguson about Diablo 2 Resurrected. Still not overseeing Rod not repping Gears, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually. We saw a lot of cool things there. Looks like they're being very faithful. So we're going to recap some of the things or give our impressions of some of the things that was discussed and we talked about there before moving on to setting up our next interview, which is going to be Bethesda focused. But before we do that, Lucy, authentic game. I know that we played Diablo together. We played Diablo 3 on console together specifically. So this is a very different kind of Diablo game, darker, and you can probably tell that from the visual style, which what they've done is they've taken the original sprite-based stuff and just built a kind of layer 4K super detailed layer on top, but kept the aesthetic. How's that darker aesthetic working out for you, Lucy?
So I'll be upfront and say that I never played Diablo 2 at its peak, but I understand and know the reverence that people have for this game. Like, my introduction to the franchise was Diablo 3, and you know me, I'm a sucker for things that are dark and macabre, and I loved that about Diablo 3. And so I'm really intrigued by Diablo 2 because, like I said, I understand just how much people love this game. I remember when they were showing it off for the first time and they were showing the kind of before and afters, our work Slack, particularly Eric Tay, who's been crushing it behind the scenes here for Playful and E3, just losing it and going into so much detail about it. And it's something that I'm genuinely really excited to try because it's definitely this big gap in my sort of gaming history as I never played Diablo 2, so it looks great, and I'm very happy to see that they are keeping it faithful but also making waves to not only modernize it a little bit, but also working with able gamers who do fantastic work to make sure that to help make sure and the games are accessible for disabled players. So I think that's really fantastic. I'm really glad that Rod called that out in this chat with Michael.
Yeah, and Rod's always been a pretty big proponent or a advocate for accessibility, you know, and was big about it when it came to Gears as well. So it's good to see that he's taking that pretty much everywhere he goes. Persia, you talked about being excited to jump in with your best friend from who's addicted and is very into Diablo. You excited by what you've seen now more? I know as a friend you would back your pal and jump in regardless, but are you now excited for yourself a bit more, having seen what they just showed?
Yeah, definitely. And something that I thought was really interesting was a lot of the controller support discussion, just in general, because there are a ton of PC games that I play, but I use my controller, you know, Apex also being one of them. So I think it's kind of nice to see behind the scenes of what really goes in to make controller support happen. And also, you know, a nice nod to like including everyone. Not everyone is godly with mouse and keyboard, all right? I'm not one of them. I love my controller, and so it's really exciting to also know that there's going to be support for that on PC versions as well.
Do you expect you'll be checking out the beta when it comes out?
Yes, definitely, because I'm like, I gotta get in there.
I will as well, but also, Tam, been in America too long. Beta. I can't believe you.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'm getting attacked about so many things right now, so I need to be careful. I got to minimize the points of attack for people. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so Diablo looking really, really interesting and really cool. Next segment we have up is going to be an interview with Bethesda's Pete Hines, Uncle Pete, you may know him as. And the interviewer, again, like I said, not the best, a bit rubbish, honestly, but they hit on some good topics. I watched through it a few times. They cover pretty much everything from Starfield, which was the big show of E3 for Bethesda and for Microsoft, and then discuss PlayStation fans and how they should feel about that, and then ultimately capping it off with Arcane's new game. So enjoy the interview. Have fun. Welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2021. As part of Play for All, it is my great pleasure to be joined by Pete Hines, SVP of Global Marketing and Comms at Bethesda, aka Uncle Pete, aka the Keeper of Secrets over at Bethesda. How are you doing, Pete?
I'm doing well, trying to keep all the secrets I can.
I'm going to do my best to pry at least one out. I've interviewed you before, and I know how hard this is, but I'm going to take... I've been training for a year now. I'm going to see what I can do. So,
I'm not
Pete,
rooting against you.
Dishonored 3, is it happening or not?
I don't know.
Damn! I failed at the first attempt. Yeah, so the Microsoft and Bethesda press conference, a big kind of moment for you coming together. What did it mean to have, you know, Todd coming out front and center as soon as the show began? You know, that's a kind of position where you'd see Phil come out and say his piece, but you know, it was your boy. It was out there. What did that mean to you as a team, and what do you think it says about Bethesda's place within the Xbox family now?
There's a lot in there. So I thought the way in which we worked together on the show was great. We always at Bethesda, our big thing is letting the content decide what is the show going to be, right? If we had an hour worth of stuff that we felt like we needed to show and talk about, we probably would have done our own show, because you can see from the Xbox show, there's nowhere for an hour of Bethesda stuff on top of all that. The show would have been 2.5 hours long. It would have been a mess. Once we decided, hey, it works best for us to collaborate together in this way, we went to them and said, hey, this is kind of how we'd like to do it. Would you be open to this? And they said, absolutely. They were really the ones that said, hey, we would love to start the show with Todd and with Starfield. And we were like, that's a brilliant idea. You should. We pitched them on the idea of maybe Redfall closing the show. They really liked that idea as well. And so I think the way in which we were able to work together, both on what is best for sort of our games and spotlights, and covering off on things that we wanted to at least touch on or speak to, and have some weight within the show, but then also still work with Xbox on how does the rest of this look, at least from a first party standpoint. I don't get to see third party stuff for obvious reasons, but they had myself and Aaron Losey in from the very beginning, going through all of their other studio content, and hey, we were thinking about this or that. It was really a lot of fun to see and to work with them. And yeah, I think it's a real honor for us, to be honest, to both open and close a show. That's a huge amount of responsibility. And I was really pleased that I thought what we had to show on Starfield, I was really pleased with. Obviously, you'd love to be able to say, here's the whole game and it's done, and I can just show you the whole thing. But game's not out till next year, so we wanted to stick with what we knew we had and could talk about. And being able to show something in engine and game assets, I think for Starfield was super important to us. And the reaction so far has been great. It's very pleasing to see.
Yeah. I mean, like, you certainly started with the showstopper with Starfield. I think a lot of people were thinking that'll be the thing that ends it. So when it came up front, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh snap, that's awesome." Again, a similar kind of question. What was it like to have that game out there finally in a more meaningful way? We saw a teaser last year. It's a game that Bethesda has multiple times, even in the trailer, said it's a game that's 25 years in the making. What does that really mean? What does that phrase kind of like? What does it represent? A game 25 years in the making? Yeah, what are you talking about when you say 25 years in the making?
Todd has talked about this a lot, and I think that's the important context to have, which is, as he's thought about it, they were working on the Elder Scrolls when I first got to Bethesda in '99. That's what we were known for. They always wanted to do more than just, sort of classic high fantasy role playing. Post-apocalyptic was the next place that they wanted to go, and the way in which we approached that was getting the Fallout license. They're like, well, we can go do our own thing, but if you could get us Fallout, that's the game we really want to make another one of. Like, we want to continue that franchise. And so we went and got that. The other game they wanted to go to after those two was a sci-fi game. It was something that Todd had tinkered with himself back when he was coding and making games. But I think to do the kind of game they wanted, and the kind of game that you would expect from the folks that made Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, to make a sci-fi game, it was a tech lift in terms of being able to represent that in a way that, you heard Todd talk about it at the start of the show, that transportive thing, right? That it wasn't enough just to do a game in space, that it wanted to do a sci-fi game where you really felt like this is real. This is a real place, which is honestly, the comments that I paid the most attention to, because, well, I want to see 5 more minutes. Well, I would have loved to have given you 5 more minutes if we had it. I'm sure we would have shown it. It's not like we just arbitrarily don't show great gameplay because we're trying to be difficult. I think what we had to show, and showing folks the inside of that ship and all of the sort of lived-in qualities of it, right? And I saw a lot of people talking about, it feels like you're watching somebody actually about to launch a ship, and all of the components and the little notes or the wear and tear on it. Like, well, I think that's part of what that team does really well, which is a sense of place that felt like a real location that you would really sit in and launch a ship, and pieces of tape and things get knocked up, that they have a sense not just of how it looks, but also how it will work. These buttons all have to do something. You can't just be punching buttons and flipping things, and getting into that level of detail requires a lot of things that, quite honestly, the team didn't feel like they had until now, to be able to execute on what they had envisioned.
Right. I guess it's tricky from like the side that I'm on as someone who is really interested in the game, and fans who are interested in the game. It's difficult and it's difficult for you as well as a team, where once you show a small amount of it, it's basically like opening the floodgates, and there's a demand for it now, and they want to see it. So I guess the question for that becomes like, do you have an idea of the cadence of how much you're going to show and when you're going to show more of it? Obviously right now everyone's just like, but what is the gameplay? When will we see the gameplay? And those questions are going to be incessant and lingering until you show the gameplay. So do you have a plan in place for when it's looking like you might show it more? Are you able to say when that might be?
Like, otherwise I'm showing up to work every day and being like, hey, anybody want to say anything about Starfield today? Or like, of course we've got a plan. But that plan, as I said before, is 100% based on where's the game at. Because we're a big believer in not just telling you about it, but showing to you, right? Yesterday, the importance of that was not that we told you about that stuff, but we said, hey, in engine, this is the game. This is what we're making. It's alpha, so, don't judge us too harshly. But this is the thing we're making, and we want it to feel like and look like to give folks that sense. I just don't think you can shortcut that. We put out another tone piece today. It shows off more concept art and gives even, a little bit more of what the team is trying to create with this game. But it's, we got a ways to go, and, we have thoughts around timing for when we want to talk about things and show things, but ultimately it has to be, is the game ready to show that feature? Because if not, it doesn't matter whether you want to or not. You can't show folks this is what it means to play the game or to see this part of the game or that part of the game. We need to be able to show it to you.
Right. I guess one of the big discussion points that exists around Starfield now is the Xbox and PC exclusivity is finally confirmed. And I guess the question around that is, at what point did that become a consideration for you over the course of development within Bethesda itself, and how did it impact both the development and also as something that you would know, particularly like your plans for marketing? Because you obviously go from speaking to a massive base of customers to kind of focusing it down a bit, right? When did that become a consideration, and how did you approach that?
Well, it wasn't a consideration until we got bought by Xbox. And then as part of Xbox, and we looked at what we were doing, it is going to be exclusive on PC and within the Xbox ecosystem. And I think it's important to phrase it like that, only because, recently within the last week, Phil has talked about how they're looking to expand that, right? And other ways they're looking to bring Xbox gaming to folks who don't own a Series S or X or even a PC, but want to play the kinds of games that, we're bringing to Game Pass and we're bringing to Xbox. So wherever and however that Xbox ecosystem expands, obviously we're excited about that. The flip side, the other thing you asked about is like, what is the impact on development? Well, I'm here to tell you, and any dev will tell you this. You go to fewer platforms, your development gets more streamlined. You're not worrying about, well, how does it work on this box versus how does it work on that box? We're not making it on that box, so it just needs to run as well as possible on this one, on a PC. Narrow focus always helps. Same is true, by the way, for a game like Deathloop. Right? When we decided to do a partnership with Sony on Deathloop, and that game became exclusive to that platform, that development got more streamlined because we said PS5 and PC, that's what we're focusing on. So I think in that way it does free up the developers a little bit in terms of what they're trying to get the thing to be the best game on. When you have fewer of those, it's going to go a little better.
And like you mentioned Deathloop there, and it's kind of a wild position that Bethesda is in right now, because you are owned by Microsoft and Xbox, but you have exclusive games for both platforms now, which is interesting and awkward. And I don't know, this question's a tricky one to answer, but I still think it's kind of important. Like, how, I'm sure you can do it because you're a master of answering questions like this, but the kind of reality of the situation is, Bethesda has released games on various other platforms, and now they're in a position where, they felt supported in a lot of ways. Like Skyrim's been on everything, Fallout's been on everything, Dishonored, that kind of stuff. But now they're in a situation where that investment in their platform is kind of gone with Starfield. It's a difficult pill to swallow, right, for PlayStation fans. How do they reconcile what's happening given where they are?
If you're a big fan of stuff we make in a game that we're making is no longer available on your platform, I totally understand if you're unhappy or pissed or whatever. Like, I get it. Those are all real feelings and frustrations. How should you deal with that? I haven't the foggiest idea. I would never presume to say, oh, here's how you can make it better and feel better. At the same time, there's only so much time I can spend on being focused on what we're not doing, right? I'm trying to focus on, yes, we're not. But the actual problem is we are making it for these other platforms, and how is that going, and where are we, and when are we ready to talk about, to your previous question, these different elements of the game, and what does that plan look like, and do we need to evolve the plan or change the plan based on the timing of things coming into the game or when they're when they're ready to show. So I tend to focus a little bit more on the well, that I can solve. That I can have a conversation around. Should we talk? How are we going to talk about this feature? How are we going to explain how this part of the game works? Because of those are things like I don't know how to allay the fears and concerns of PlayStation 5 fans, other than to say, well, I'm a PlayStation 5 player as well, and I've played games on that console, and there's games I'm going to continue to play on it. But if you want to play Starfield, PC and Xbox, sorry. All I can really say is I apologize, because I'm certain that that's frustrating to folks, but there's not a whole lot I can do about it.
It's a good thing that Microsoft makes Game Pass such a compelling proposition. It kind of, now more than ever, the idea of getting into the Xbox ecosystem is so appealing. And speaking of Game Pass, as a company, as someone who's been within Bethesda, how has your kind of perception of Game Pass changed, if at all? Because it's gone from being this kind of interesting idea to absurdly successful extremely quickly, right? It's
absurdly successful, yeah.
Yeah, it's unreal.
And well, you can trace it all back to one decision, which predates us joining Xbox. I haven't even gotten around to asking anybody, hey, how did this happen or come about? But all of the folks who decided, hey, we're going to start putting our studio titles in Game Pass day one, when they're also available for sale, that changed everything. It's remarkable how different Game Pass is now when you understand that you don't have to wait, because the old way of doing it would have been well, a year from now, maybe that game gets added, or 2 years from now. Even our own participation was always well post-launch. They would say, hey, what do you think about putting, a Fallout this or a Doom that into Game Pass or ESO? But it was always well after that content came out, and shifting to Game Pass day one, and how many people are going to play your titles. The number of folks we've seen going into games like Prey or Dishonored or Doom 64 or whatever it is remarkable. And getting to now talk to that Game Pass team and really all of Xbox as a first party, which is still weird to say, and just learning how they think about it and approach it, and what Game Pass can do for your title in terms of player base and people active in your game is pretty amazing. And I'm super excited for where they are, and I'm even more excited for where they're heading and what they have planned. Like you said, I just think it's an obscene value. Somebody said to me on social media the other day, you can spend a lot of time trying to find every Bethesda title that you might want for your collection, or you can just sign up to Game Pass and almost everything they've made is sitting in there waiting to be played. It's a ridiculous value on top of everything else that comes out, and it's in there. So I've become a massive fan. I mean, I was a subscriber to Game Pass before, but I would sort of graze it. I play a ton of it now, especially the xCloud stuff. I find that to be a really fun way to be able to take my games with me, and I've been using it a ton over the last 6-7 months.
Did the conversation around it change from the Bethesda side in the same way that it did for people who are on the outside looking at it? People looked at it and they were like, I'm not going to sure if this is work. The idea of launching games into it seems like it's weird, and could that really hamper the performance of a game, to now where it's it makes perfect sense? Was it similar in the case of you, where you're do we want to be putting Starfield on this for free, basically, to now being oh, it makes perfect sense?
100%, for sure, because if you don't understand it and you don't understand the mechanics of what's taking place behind the curtain, how are player behaviors actually manifesting themselves versus you or me or anybody else going, well, I assume if it's in Game Pass, nobody's going to buy it. And they go, no, hold on. Let us show you what we've seen from these. That's what really proved it, is they had this idea, and then they proved, hey, we can launch something day one in Game Pass. And of course, there's some cannibalization. It's ridiculous to suggest otherwise, right? I haven't bought a first-party Xbox title in a couple of years, because when Gears came out, I just played it through Game Pass. And when Halo comes out, I'm just playing it through Game Pass. But when you look at the larger picture of the sheer volume of people playing your game and how they engage with your content and how Game Pass is doing, it's honestly, Bethesda's mantra in all of the almost 22 years I've been here is pretty simple. We want to make great games and we want as many people to play it as possible. Now, okay, put aside the exclusive thing for a half a second because we already talked about that. But the number of people Game Pass now brings to a title and what your day one launches look like in terms of just how many people are playing your game, it's multiple factors, above where we would have been before. And the idea of that many people playing your game on the day that it comes out is ultimately what we're all about. Right? It's just I want lots and lots of people to play whatever Arcane Austin has spent years of their lives working on. I want a ton of people to play it, enjoy it, give it a try. And I think Game Pass is allowing us to do that exponentially better than we were before, I think.
Phil said it himself, where it has an uplifting effect on purchases as well as people buying it. And Outriders was used as kind of like the example of that, where people saw their friends getting into Outriders through Game Pass and were like, well, I don't have Game Pass, so I guess I'll have to buy it. And then it's a very clever funnel, and you got to respect the business acumen put behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly,
to...
we've seen it in ESO and 76, by the way, Tamar. Like that not only of people buying the game, but also just staying in the game. Like we might think of it as, well, you're getting that for free, but that's not how they think about it. They think I'm signing up for this thing and I'm going to spend untold number of hours playing things that are in Game Pass. And it really has changed how we think about those players and our relationship to them in our games.
Redfall, really interesting concept. I guess my main question with that game is, from what the trailer was really fascinating. The one thing I was kind of looking for in it is how the kind of Arcane lineage or Arcane design ethos is going to be represented in the game. Obviously, they're known for immersive sims. Is there anything you can say or speak to about how that will be the case? Is it the case that it will have that?
Absolutely. Look, this is an evolution, by their own admission, of Arcane Austin and how they think about those kinds of games, right? And if you think about what they do, how do you break down a Dishonored or a Prey into sort of basic fundamental levels, what they're doing? Well, one, it's very much non-scripted, right? They're big believers in systems-based games where they create some systems and they put them all together, and then whatever the player wants to do in those worlds, however they want to try and approach different situations is entirely okay, right? You want to jump off a giant building in Dishonored, and before you splat on the ground, manage to possess a fish and suddenly be swimming in the water. Like, that's not a gameplay intended feature. That was a tester who figured out that the systems in the game allowed them to do it. And then Arcane said, we got to take that out because you're going to break the game. We said, well, now we got to support if you manage to possess a fish, and what is the player now going to do? So in a lot of those same ways, Redfall is very similar. It's systems based. Arcane does a great job of creating a sense of place, whether it's in Prey or Dishonored. It feels like a very realistic, tangible world, and I think that's the case in Redfall. And then just the way that they've gone about approaching the gameplay. Whether you're playing it by yourself, you can play it essentially single player, solo it, and play it by yourself, or you can play it with other folks. But it's going to you're going to feel that Arcane DNA as you're playing through the game with how the game works. They've talked about ever changing. The idea is that you're in a game world that really isn't ever the same. Every time you play it, you're getting something different. That the world is changing from the last time you played it in ways that are meaningful from a gameplay standpoint. Like that a certain location isn't always the same thing every single time you play the game. That one time you play it might be one thing, and the next time you play it might be something else. And how you interact with that, whether there's a quest related to it, whether there's stuff in there you want to go get for exploration, it's really more give the player the tools and then let them experience our story in the way that they want to experience it, and have it be feeling like it's constantly changing, evolving. And I think once you get a chance to play it, you're going to be like, I totally see where all of that Arcane DNA is popping its head up across all these different parts of the game.
Honestly, I'm glad that you're going for vampires instead of the low-hanging fruit these days, which is zombies. I'm very excited about that. The other thing I wanted to kind of touch on is what wasn't there. Machine Games massive studio for you, great studio that produces some excellent games. What does a lot of people, especially in our community, very excited to figure out or understand or see what the future of Wolfenstein looks like? Is there anything you can tell us about, where that franchise is at and where even the studio Machine Games is at? Is it time for them to look elsewhere, or is it, they're working on a few things? So, what is the future of Wolfenstein looking like?
They're working on the Indiana Jones game that we just talked about earlier this year, and obviously we literally just announced that deal, so you can make your own guesses at how far along that game is. They're in the very, very, very early stages of working on the Indiana Jones game. Where we are for Wolfenstein, or quite honestly any other franchise that we don't have announced plans on, we'll have to wait until we get to the point of wanting to talk about it. But you can put me at the head of the list of people who want to see another Wolfenstein game, so no worries there.
I imagine as a creative team, a lot of people are like, let's do something new and different. But at the same time, the fans are out there being like, I want a new Wolfenstein, I want another Doom, I want another Dishonored, I want another XYZ game. How do you approach finding that balance, especially now that you're owned by Microsoft and also you're working for the game?
I think we'll have to find out, because again, what you have to remember is we didn't have teams sitting around doing nothing, waiting for us to be acquired by Xbox so that we could then figure out, okay, let's figure out what you're going to work on next, right? BGS is already working on Starfield, then they're going to make Test 6. ZeniMax Online is doing ESO. They've talked about they're working on another project. We haven't talked about what id is up to, as they've finished doing updates and support for Doom Eternal. But Machine Games is doing Indiana Jones. We just announced Arcane Austin's Redfall. Arcane Leon is working on Deathloop. Tango is working on Ghostwire. So if you go through our studios, you actually find, oh yeah, I know what most of them are actively working on right now. So we don't have a lot of folks sitting around going, well, let's make something new. And should it be a sequel or should it be a new IP? We're just not at a point in this moment to start saying, okay, because we already have plans that have been laid out for what are these studios doing for years at a time. And one of the things Xbox said was, we are not messing with what you're doing or what you have going on. So there's been no change to any of our current plans, because their thing is just do what you're planning on doing. And, we want to work with you. Obviously, we want to understand what those are, right? Like, they're not just like, oh, Redfall. Matt Booty is always like, hey, how's it going? And, talking to Harvey Smith. So, those conversations are happening, but we're not really having what is Studio X going to work on next, because everybody already knows what they're working on for the next number of years. So I think those things will end up manifesting themselves as we go along.
Final question, very quickly. You mentioned there, what's the deal with Ghostwire Tokyo? When we're going to see that again? Please, Pete, I'm begging you, let it out. Let it come out and play.
I don't know.
Hardball. I like it.
The content drives it. The content drives it, and when we feel like that game is ready, we've got plans, but all of those plans are based on dev. And as you know, nobody's development is going exactly the same as when we were all in the office together. So, we have to be patient and let teams take the time to make what they were planning on making in very different circumstances than we've been dealing with for the last year and a half.
Pete, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for being
Absolutely.
with us. If you want to keep your eyes on GameSpot.com, you will be treated with plenty more E3 coverage content. Stay tuned. See you soon.
Welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2021. We've got some insights as to what Bethesda are all working on there, courtesy of Tamor Hussein chatting with Uncle Pete Hines. Tam was really down on himself about this interview. He kept saying that, that interview is not so good, but he was great. And a lot of little tidbits about things like Redfall as well as Indiana Jones. So very exciting. And that VOD will be up on GameSpot's YouTube if you want to check it out. But before we throw to even more trailers and exclusives and interviews that we have lined up today, I'm joined by some very special guests to talk about E3 and what their favorite reveals and surprises of the show have been. So joining me today, Tim Gettys from Kind of Funny. Hi, Tim.
Let Tim host. How are you doing, Lucy? Thank you so much for having me. This is my favorite part of E3. We were just talking about it, where it's like all of the business is over, so now friends just get to hang out and talk about what they love about video games.
That's my favorite part too, and like putting these panels together, putting these great minds together has been an absolute joy. So thank you for joining us. From Game Ranks, we've got Jake Baldino. Hello, mate.
Hey, thanks for having me. We're tired, but we are alive. And, thanks for having me.
Tired but alive and ready to talk about games. And Stephanie Ijoma from Nene Saga. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, how you doing? I hope everyone is well. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, cosign, I am very tired. It's like 6 p.m. here, but when it's games, it's 24/7.
Worldwide, baby.
It is. We don't.
It's people. Yeah, games don't sleep, and neither do we. So thank you all for joining me to chat about biggest reveals and biggest surprises. Before we jump into that, though, how's everyone feeling about E3 being a fully online show this year? Because obviously, usually used to either watching press conferences from home and everything be a bit more spread out, or actually being at the LACC and it just being this sort of week. But there's always been that downtime, whereas it feels like this year, for me, like everything being online, there's been so much more crammed in than usual. Tim, how's this E3 been for you?
It's been really interesting. I think as an industry, we're definitely moving in the right direction, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the differentiation between Summer Game Fest and the ESA's E3, they need to kind of figure out working together a little bit more in some cohesion, because right now I think that it's to the detriment of both sides that there's this kind of scramble for content when it shouldn't be content. It should be showcases that matter. And so I think that in a couple of years, it's only going to get better. And I think that we're moving towards something where when you look at last year, obviously there's a lot of factors at play as well. But when we look at last year's Summer Game Fest, they took the E3 week and spread it out over an entire summer, which turned the traditional E3, which was us looking at the couple big first-party and third-party presentations, and then we're like, oh, if we want to, there's other things too. And it kind of turned it into everything is equal. Everyone gets a presentation, and everyone needs to watch everything at all times. And I think that kind of took away a little bit of the shine and the competition and lessened the waters. And this year I kind of feel like was an overreaction to that, where it didn't solve the problems, it just did all of that in less time.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's just because I've got Bo Burnham's inside on the brain, but it definitely felt like a little bit of everything all of the time. Like everyone you get a press conference, you get a press conference, and maybe some of the press conferences, to quote like the tweets that have been kind of going viral over the last week, could have been an email. But Stephanie, how has E3 changed for you? Do you think everyone got their time to shine?
Yeah, I feel like, again, going back to what you said about some things could have been an email, it was very, very true, especially because of how we've navigated through the digital space over the last year. I think some studios didn't really have to be at E3 and it would have been okay. I think that everyone kind of tried to do as much as they could to make the most out of E3. And as we know, E3 is stretched out over 3-4 days. So I do feel like people did get their shine, but at the same time, it was still okay if you didn't, because again, we're all trying to navigate through this new norm. So yeah.
Yeah, and Jake, obviously the big one that everyone's talking about is not at E3. They've been pulling back for the last couple of years, but obviously lack of Sony. Do you think that is to the detriment of E3, or is it to kind of the benefit because everyone gets a little bit more breathing room and Sony gets their own thing?
Kind of a double-edged sword. I feel like everybody's clashing. I feel like every big company needs to meet and say, okay, who's showing what when? Because it is kind of like fighting for attention, fighting for airtime. I think overall, if Sony was here, it would have led to probably a little bit more positive sentiment overall, where you have a lot of people excited about Nintendo, you have a lot of people excited about Xbox, and a couple of surprises from Sony, especially back when they did do E3, when they had those couple of years where they just had like mic drop moments. That definitely would have helped, but at least, at the very least now, it's kind of like a level playing field for both publishers and content creators. It's like we're all covering this the same way at home. We're not getting to touch the games, but it at least still serves as a sort of equalizer, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, that E3, the mic drop moments, like I will never forget E3 2015 for Sony. Like Last Guardian, Shenmue 3, Final Fantasy 7 remake. Like, it was an unbelievable year, and I just don't think, I think Microsoft had like a super strong showing this year, but I think that's still the sort of peak that I always consider when I think of like huge big E3 moments. But speaking of huge moments and reveals, let's go around the room. What is everyone psyched about? Tim, what was your biggest surprise? What put the biggest smile on your face?
I was with you in that room in 2015 when Sony had that E3 conference, and I remember you screaming. So, and I was screaming as well. So that was a lot of fun. But this year, man, I think in terms of surprises, there's two that I really want to talk about. Just real quick, I just want to say it: Metroid Dread. I can't believe it's real. I can't believe a game that I've been reading about for 15 years at this point and hoping would be true is real. And it's a shocking move for Nintendo for them to do this. I thought maybe they might be cute, show Metroid 5, have the name Dread come up, and then go away and become something else like we've seen games do before. But no, they're committing to it. And it looks awesome. It looks scary. It looks like it's really kind of trying to take what Fusion started so many years ago, being the last new 2D Metroid game, and moving that forward. But for me, the biggest surprise was actually Halo Infinite. And the surprise for me was that 343 turned the sentiment around. After their first showing, it was kind of like scary. We're looking at it like, oh no, like Xbox needs to figure this out. And then all the development, like the creative directors dropping out and all of that. And then as things kept going on, the delay, et cetera, I think all of us were kind of like, a little trepidatious, but for them to come through and the campaign stuff looked great. But really, I'm talking about that multiplayer trailer. They really did exactly what they had to do, which is keep it simple. What do we love about Halo? We love those hype multiplayer moments. We love sticking people with the plasma grenades. We love getting into Warthog with your friends and just being like, go, go, go! I got the flag! I got the flag! And this trailer was just simply that energy. And I think a lot of the time when we look at nostalgia-based IP and trailers and things like that, it's going back to characters that we haven't seen in a long time, or going back to locales or this or that. This went back to gameplay that we remember. This went back to experiences with friends as a gamer that we remember that we're about to be able to do again this fall. And that's a unique thing that not many games can do, but Halo can do it.
Yeah, and Stephanie, we were chatting before the show. You mentioned Halo as well. What caught your eye?
Just how well they listened to the fans, the gamers. They went back, they finished their assignments, and again, going off what Tim said, they didn't do too much. They knew this is what we love. We didn't want it to be overboard. We wanted it to be what we loved as Halo fans, and I'm super excited to try the multiplayer aspect, especially it coming to Games Pass, free on PC, as well as the campaign. There's so much that they're giving us, and now you actually get the opportunity to actually try it out with the flight testing that they're doing as well. It just looks absolutely incredible, and this is why we love games, because games are just an ongoing journey for us, and it's always about improving the experience, and you can really see that you're about to get immersed when you play the game. So
yeah, I'm like, Halo was always going to have this kind of uphill struggle, I think, when it came to Infinite, because it's turning 20 this year. You want to make a game that is faithful to the people who played it 20 years ago and have grown and evolved along with the franchise, but you also want to make a game that reflects the sort of sensitivities of the modern first-person shooter player. A lot of first-person shooter franchises these days owe a lot to Halo, and it's like this weird thing where they kind of have to cater to both audiences without alienating either, and so I'm really intrigued to see more of Halo and play it later this year. But we were talking as well before the show, and like, a lot of people mentioned a lot of stuff from Xbox. So before we talk about the big show closer, Redfall, Jake, you mentioned A Plague Tale.
Yeah, I was really excited to see A Plague Tale Requiem revealed. It's the follow-up to 2019's Plague Tale Innocence. As someone who I'm always like rooting and looking out for like those single-player narrative adventure games, I was so happy to see this. We kind of knew Asobo had said that it did well and they were going to work on another one, but I didn't expect to see a massive glimpse of it so soon. It's a cinematic trailer, sure, but it's giving you pretty much everything you want. You're seeing all kinds of Plague Tale type stuff. You're seeing spooky, gross rats, horrific stuff. There's like slight religious themes. There's new characters. There's old characters. Amicia, the main character, seems to have grown a little bit, and kind of she's grown into more of like a badass warrior. Now she has a crossbow, which is kind of like a level up from the slingshot. So I was really, really happy to see that, especially because I think it's like one of the best things that publisher Focus Home puts out. So yes.
Yeah, I was like, I think at Xbox's press conference, I was genuinely so surprised to see it. And actually, Game Pass was how I came to play A Plague Tale anyway, and so I guess I shouldn't have been that surprised. But the trailer looks great. I think a lot of these CGI trailers have been these really good tone pieces that have just really managed to capture and encapsulate what the game is about without necessarily showing gameplay. And I think the thing about Plague Tale is that like it was so different in a lot of ways, and so I'm very excited to see more of it. But also, everyone's very excited about Redfall. So, Stephanie, you mentioned this one, brand new game from Arcane. What intrigued you about this one?
Firstly, representation. Like, oh, just the opening sequence of Redfall. I was just in awe. I was so speechless just how well they just caught so much in such a short time. It was so interesting to watch, just to see a black dark-skinned woman lead the campaign and the trailer for a really big new IP coming from Arcane Studios was incredible. It was an emotional thing for me as well. You don't often see black women, leading the charge when it comes to games like this, but the fact that there's somebody that looks like you that's actually in a game now, and it's not just a bypass or a lazy representation of it. They got the curls right, the skin right, she's glowing, not even just from the hair or the skin, like literally glowing from some of the powers that she has. Like, just everything was glowing, and it just looks like it's going to be such a great co-op game to play. And I'm already saying this now, but Bugsy, I will always be playing the black woman when it comes to the co-op game. And it looks like this is going to be something where it's going to really kind of showcase the breadth of what Arcane Studios can provide. Obviously, yes, we have like Deathloop coming out, but Redfall now, you can tell that there's this seriousness into bringing that diversity within, gaming and stuff. And again, it just looks like just the whole story of like vampires and just that nice little twist to it. And you can just see the variety of like what you can do in regards to the weapons you have. And I'm interested to see the kind of abilities that all the characters have. But again, she stole the show for me, and like, big up to Arcane Studios for really just showing out, and Xbox as well for just ending it on such a high. So
Yeah,
Redfall, that's it.
God, absolutely. And I mean, when we kind of did our pre-show for Xbox, I was like, God, I really hope I see something from Deathloop. Arcane are one of my favorite studios. I think they do such wonderful things, and I will gush about Arcane as long as I am on air. And then to see something like Redfall, which just came out of nowhere, it feels like, and not only for it to end the show, but also to end on such a strong note. And like you said, it has strong representation. Like they really, like they know and they care what they're doing with regards to representation, and putting this black character front and center. It's just fantastic work from them. And I'm also really excited to see just more vampire games. It seems like every so often gaming has these weird like phases. I remember a while ago it was like bow and arrows were the big thing, and now
There's a lot of
it
PK
seems like
news, right? PKE news right now.
Yeah.
Every game.
I think vampires are gonna be the next one. But let's talk about some other games. Elden Ring, technically not really a part of E3. It was a part of Summer Game Fest. I think it blew pretty much everyone away when we finally saw that big, huge gameplay reveal from Elden Ring. But who wants to chat about this one? Jake, Tim.
But before, I'm gonna pass this one to Jake for sure. On Arcane, last thing I want to say, keep your eye on Arcane. I'm calling it now. They're going to be the Insomniac of Xbox. They're going to be the ones that are putting out such consistent titles at such a quick clip that in a couple years we're going to be like, wow. Anyways.
Yep, that will be
Jake,
the go-to.
on to you.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, Elden Ring, right? I think the thing to look for with Elden Ring, from what we've seen and like the little things we've heard, is emphasis on character building. I think the amount of different weapon types we saw and just different looking characters and fighting styles, I think is going to be pretty sweet, especially in conjunction with just how From Software is kind of going to do their spin on an open world hub thing. We get to see Ghost Horse, which is an exciting combination of words, and with magic abilities and all this like crazy new stuff. combined with just gross character designs, crazy bosses. I feel like everybody really got what they wanted with this reveal trailer. There's some talk, I've seen some people saying, oh, well, this just looks like Dark Souls 4 then. And that's like, yes, that's what everybody wanted. That's the point. So this looks like them expanding upon those themes. There's like little lore, Easter eggs and stuff that I've seen a lot of people get really excited about that I'm not as qualified to talk about because I'm more of just a Bloodborne person than anything. But there's a lot going on, and we got a lot to chew on with just a pretty short, straightforward trailer. So I think for the next year, it's going to be a lot of Elden Ring. It's going to be Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild speculation, just all the way.
God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as soon as we saw the Elden Ring, like I was fortunate enough to be on a call with our very own Timur Hussein when the Elden Ring trailer happened.
Oh.
I wish I'd recorded it. I was taking screenshots of him.
There's
but,
so
like,
many memes.
so many, like, if it wasn't his reading Trump tweets, cat meme, it's the Elden Ring meme. Like, I love Timur, but he's like so excited about Elden Ring, and like that is infectious, and I can't wait to see kind of the deep dives. I know we've already done one, but I'm waiting for Vati Vidya to kind of really get in there and just dissect that trailer frame by frame. But Jake, you mentioned it there. We saw it yesterday. We saw a sneak peek at the Breath of the Wild sequel, Breath of the Wild 2, Breath of the Wild, Too Fast, Too Furious. They haven't actually said what the name of the game is. Hey, I'm so like, I love E3. But as soon as it's done, like, we're going to go see Fast 9. Like,
we're 9 days away. I can't believe it. Woo! Family, baby.
We're back.
We're back. So yeah, what did everyone make of the glimpse of Breath of the Wild?
It took my breath away. You know what I'm talking about? I can't believe it. This looks so good. 2022, kind of a bummer. Not getting the title, kind of a bummer. Bummers aside, are you kidding me? That looks incredible. It really, I can't believe that there are shots in that trailer that made me gasp in a way that I did when I played Breath of the Wild a couple years ago. Seeing the kind of islands in the sky, or as I call them, skylands, I am just blown away by the way that they're breaking through the clouds as Link or whoever is running on the Hyrule fields below, and just all of the different gameplay mechanics. Like me and Barrett Courtney over at Kind of Funny just did an hour-long breakdown trailer going frame by frame, and the amount of things. Thank you. YouTube.com/kindoffunnygames. You can check it out now. But it was a lot of fun. Like he knows the lore way more than I do, and him kind of breaking down like why his arm looks that way and theories on who this person might be and all this. There's so much. They gave us something to eat, and we were starving. So I'm really, really excited. I think they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, what did you make of it?
So I'm very, very happy for a lot of Zelda fans. I know they've been yearning for some Breath of the Wild 2 footage. That trailer makes me actually want to go and play the first one. I have not played it yet, so I'm actually now looking forward to playing it. So it brings me that journey into Breath of the Wild 2. And I'm sure a lot of people who have played number 1 now want to go replay it again to get amped for number 2. But it looks absolutely incredible, and you can just see that the model of Breath of the Wild has been really inspired into other games, because I've seen it a lot of the time, and I think they just kind of needed to drop a little source again to let everyone know and remind them, like, we were the staple, we were the founders of this kind of open RPG kind of game. So I'm very excited to see the journey of it, and you know what, let them take their time creating this game, because again, from what I saw and from all the good reviews, it was such a high standard, and they want to maintain it or just go beyond that. So they should take all the time that they need.
See, I've done that as well. I held off playing Breath of the Wild, and I've been replaying it. I've been playing it over the last year, so now I don't have to wait as long. So I feel like I've cheated the system in some way. Jake, what about you? Closing thoughts on the Breath of the Wild sequel?
I'm just really excited about the speculation. I think Barrett and Tim's video got me like so amped for just weird dissecting of every single little thing and lore. It's not something typically done with Zelda, at least not to this degree. There is the deep lore stuff. It is intertwined, but now it's starting to feel like a cultural event. It's starting to feel like the first Marvel teaser trailer, or like some new show or something like that. So if Nintendo kind of keeps that type of train rolling, like #show Link's face. I just made that up.
Make it happen.
I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be great. I think the future is bright.
Well, Jake, Tim, and Stephanie, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been great just to chat games with you all, so thank you all so much. Coming up next, we have a block of exclusive trailers and glimpses at gameplay, so things like Bright Memory Infinite and Serial Cleaners. And after that, we're going to come back to the desk. It'll be Tam, Persia, and myself. And then we've got things like Guardians of the Galaxy coming up later, as well as Far Cry 6. So stay tuned to GameSpot for the rest of the day.
In 2017, Polish game development studio Draw Distance released Serial Cleaner. With a string of successes to its name, the story continues. Today, we will learn what 2021 has in store for the acclaimed franchise. So what was exactly the niche that Serial Cleaner filled? Draw Distance didn't just come into a vacuum and invent crime drama. Instead, they have replaced killing with cleaning.
Do you think cleaning is boring? Yeah, I hear. But how about sliding on blood and then using a vacuum to clean it? Ever heard about Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction? You will solve some problems as well. We replaced the cartoony slapstick with cynical 90s humor. Then moved into New York City and went bigger on everything else.
For the development team, one thing was certain: the sequel had to be ambitious.
Better graphics. In true 90s fashion, we're moving to 3D, refined gameplay, more playable characters, a wholesome soundtrack, and a believable AI.
We don't want you figuring out our meticulously crafted puzzles. We are much more into giving you some funny tools so you can solve problems the way you want it. If you are into sneaking, that's cool, we've got you covered. But if you're not, give us a chance. No matter which character you play, there's always some room to express your more unconventional playstyle.
What would be a concept without the hero? This time around, there's an entire ensemble.
While Bob, the anti-hero of the prequel, makes a comeback, we introduce 3 new playable characters in Serial Cleaners. Each character is tied to a map and has a unique set of abilities. Erin Reed, aka Viper, is a skilled hacker and the youngest cleaner on the crew. Even though she's secretive about her past, her wit and her skills landed her a job she would never think to enjoy this much.
Every hero needs a scene to truly shine. Let's have a closer look on one of the levels.
Rather than constructing each asset separately, we created our levels, painting it all at once, treating it as a huge artistic canvas, layering multiple paint stroke, graffiti tags, visual effects, and then purposely damaging it, the same way that Basquiat did in his work.
In order to truly appreciate art, a context is required.
The main inspiration here is Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was ahead of his time. and inspire future artists.
Attention to detail is a virtue that is cherished at Draw Distance.
We draw inspiration from 90s pop culture, sure, but to tap into its unique atmosphere, you have to live and breathe the 90s. I drive a 90s SUV. I play games on CDs and cartridges, binge movies on VHS tapes. I even switched to MS-DOS laptop. We're going full method on this one.
Psycho is one of our more eccentric cleaners. He carries a chainsaw under his coat, which tells a lot about him. He chops bodies and neutralizes people by throwing limbs at them. Guess what kind of music he's into?
Every era has its own sound, and the sound of the 90s was truly profound.
Hey, I'm Josh Eustace. I'm writing the music for Serial Cleaners. I've been known for recording under the name Telephone Tel Aviv for about 22 years now, but I've also played in Nine Inch Nails and produced other bands. The composition job on this video game is really difficult. What we're doing is creating a sort of ecosystem of musics that were all related in the way that these musics were related in the real world. Most of the music is sort of rooted in kind of 90s subcultures. East Coast hip-hop stuff, body music that was popular in the 90s, kind of early rave-related music. And then there's one guy, Bob, who tends to like sort of late period ECM jazz, which is more of a 70s, 80s thing because he's a little older. Kind of an imaginary 90s for a sort of alternate reality, I guess.
Every story comes to an end, but good stories get a sequel with a capital S.
Hi, I'm Feedin, founder of Feed Games and the game director of Recompile. So last year we announced our ambitious project, and since then the team has continued to make great progress on development of the game. Built for the new gen, Recompile will bring a unique take on the 3D Metroidvania genre. You, as the player, are an entity trapped in a virtual world, and the only way to survive is to hack, traverse, and fight the many obstacles in your way. We have partnered with 65 Days of Static to bring you this amazing track present in the trailer. So we're excited to announce that Recompile will be available this August. So let's get right into it.
Hey, this is Ben Wander, designer at The Wandering Band, and I'm here to share all the new features we've added to Airborne Kingdom. Airborne Kingdom is the Sky City Builder. You grow your town among the clouds and explore an entirely wide open landscape below you. We've been hard at work, and I'm proud to say all the features you see in this video will be there for day one console launch. In our new Creative Mode sandbox, we've taken the rules away. Build your kingdoms to your heart's delight and customize them with a range of new dyes and metals to choose from. Looking for more of a challenge? We've added a new hard difficulty for the main campaign. All the dials are turned up, so you need a deeper understanding of all our systems. Finally, for those who have already seen the credits roll, there's New Game Plus. A much wider world to explore with more randomization than ever, along with 3 brand new town centers. Each town center has a different look and imparts its own boosts. Try playing New Game Plus on hard difficulty for a real challenge. With all these new features, I can't wait to hand over the controller to our unique blend of city builder and exploration. What kingdoms will you create while you explore the skies later this year?
Welcome to the Zarkov system of Everspace 2. My name is Eric Schrader, the Community Ambassador for Rockfish Games. I'll be giving you a little tour and talk about a few upcoming elements for the game. You may catch a couple placeholders, but that's only because this is hot off the press. So let's get started. Zarkov itself exists as a massive celestial vortex orbiting around its star. And in that vortex lie a series of natural hazards like lightning and solar storms, as well as monumental cloud formations, rich with valuable resources. The vertical asteroids of Zarkov are a mysterious and dangerous place for passerbys and transports alike. A lot of failed deliveries and various secrets can be found out here. Even with all the natural protection the vortex provides, outlaws will still be outlaws though, and you can expect to see them around a lot of warp gates and trade lanes. By the time you've reached this sector, you should have found a couple playful and easy-to-use synergies to really capitalize on the moment. These outlaws thought they had me outnumbered, but a quick use of the Annihilator virus evens the playing field in a heartbeat. Scattered across its vast storm, Zarkov holds reclusive sites that have remained long since dormant. Veteran pilots of Everspace 1 may recognize this territory to be quite ancient. All these fancy visuals are not just for show. If you venture into the storm, you will get burned. This mighty colonial warship is one of its many victims that it has swallowed. These lightning rods wreak havoc against your ship's systems, leaving you vulnerable for attack, or simply on a collision course to the other asteroids nearby. You may run into opposing scavengers with really strong armor or powerful shielding, but you can bypass that entirely with the corrosion missile. This stackable corrosive effect eats away at the hull until there is simply nothing left to hold the target's frame together, and it just falls apart at the seams. This entire sector is a gold mine for anyone into pilfering, but there's a lot more going on in this system that we haven't quite gotten to yet. It won't be much longer until we pull back that veil and reveal a slew of new opportunities for you in Everspace 2. Hey, thanks for joining me in this little teaser of the Zarkov system. I've got to swing on out of here, but I'm sure we'll be talking about more Everspace 2 real soon. Toodles!
and welcome back. Hope you enjoyed those trailers. I'm excited to talk about them, and there is even more on the way, so make sure you're staying tuned. But Lucy, Tam, this is just our first little preview of more to come. What has stood out to you so far, Tam, from what we've learned so far, even though I know you've seen all these before?
Some of them are new to me actually, and there were a bunch in that showcase that, or the last block of trailers that were really cool. And the one we talked about briefly was Small Land, which I'm very very into. I love games that do the Honey I Shrunk the Kids kind of vibe, but this one took a little while for it to click. But you're playing as a bug, which is pretty cool. I was like, all right, I can get behind this Honey I Shrunk the Kids vibe with, but while also being an actual bug. Looked real cool, like had some cool, interesting combat looking stuff, but then didn't expect the crafting stuff and the building stuff, which I'm not huge into that stuff, but I do, and I'm not huge into it mainly because I know that I will get obsessed with it, so I try and limit it. I had a time when I first started playing Minecraft, I got very into Minecraft building. I was like, I gotta stop. I've got to be careful with these kind of games. But the look of that one, there's something about it that is drawing me in. So I think I might give that one a go.
Yeah,
I mean, I've played Valheim with you. I've played Valheim with Tam, so I can definitely attest to the fact that he loves building.
It's addicting, and a lot of games that we've seen this week incorporate a lot of crafting, and I'm really excited, but I'm also like, oof, my time is going to be out the window. But Lucy, what has stood out to you so far?
I think also Small Land, I think it's just a really cute concept, and like Tam said, it is the Honey I Shrunk the Kids, which is one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid. Also as well, I think Serial Cleaners, but that's just because I am a sucker for a good pun. And so if you have a punny title like that, I am automatically going to be very, very interested in it. But as well, like Bright Memory Infinite 2. I think, not Bright Memory Infinite 2, Bright Memory Infinite, 2. Also looks great. And so, I like, that's the thing, reason I love E3, you get to see so many of these games that you wouldn't necessarily maybe have your finger on the pulse of otherwise, and so they all look great.
Yeah, I really loved how Bright Memory Infinite looked. I definitely want to try that one out. I was kind of getting, similar vibes to like older titles like Vanquish and stuff, but I feel like this one is reminiscent of a lot of other shooters that we've played, but in a different setting, and the main character looks really cool. I'm down with it. I wanted to test it out a little bit more and play it a little bit more. Another one that I saw that I really liked, also in the crafting section, was Airborne Kingdom. I'm just all about building stuff, and now we can do it in the air. Literally, the possibilities are endless. I really have been enjoying what we've been seeing so far, but your guys' thoughts on Everspace 2, because I love me some space, and that one was looking really good.
Yeah, it looks great.
I think we have to I was going to say, I think it looks great. It looks awesome. But yeah, I think we have to actually kick it now to the interview section, which is coming up next, which involves Lucy interviewing Jean-Francois Dugas and various other members of the Eidos Montreal team for Guardians of the Galaxy. So let's see.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Lucy, and joining me today to discuss the recently revealed Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, we've got folks from Marvel Games and Eidos Montreal. So let's go around the panel. We've got Senior Narrative Director Mary Dinmal.
Hello.
We have Senior Creative Director Jean-Francois Dugas.
Hi.
And we also have VP of Creative of Marvel Games, Bill Roseman.
Pew pew! Hello, true believers.
Now we've got quite the panel to discuss this game. So Bill, I'm going to come to you first. Why Eidos for Guardians of the Galaxy?
Marvel is built upon really bringing together the right creators with the characters they love, and letting the creators bring their voice and their vision and telling their story with the Marvel characters. And that's the case here. Eidos Montreal has the passion, the knowledge, the rock and roll DNA, the humor to create this story. They're the perfect collaborators to bring them to life, and we can't wait for the players to get their hands on the game. It's just freaking delightful what the team has created, and that's all we can hope for at Marvel, is people who love the characters as much as we do to bring themselves to them and create something awesome.
And I mean, speaking of the characters, you obviously have this sort of embarrassment of riches to choose from when it comes to Marvel characters, both, you know, the famous faces that we've seen for the last however many decades, but also you kind of have those more niche villains and heroes to pull from. So Mary, where do you start when you tackle a project like Guardians of the Galaxy? Like, you obviously have the comics, you've got the movies, but you're wanting to put your own spin on things. Where do you start?
Well, for us, we really start by diving into the resource material. So obviously we've seen the movies and loved them, and we then did a deep dive into the comic books. And it was really fun to discover the differences that between these characters in the different forms they took. There's always a common essence of who these characters are, but they were always a little bit different. And realizing that, you kind of realize, okay, now we get to put our stamp on this by discovering what we want to bring, as long as we're true to the essence of, you know, Star-Lord the space pirate, Gamora the deadliest woman in the galaxy. And you kind of just dive into the source material, and then you let your imaginations go wild, and you work with Bill and his team to make sure that everything you're putting forward is still staying within the essence of the characters.
And I was going to say, and I mean, watching the presentation, it's immediately apparent, just like the characters, you've nailed them, but it's also really, really funny. What are the challenges of making a game where you can hear those lines over and over again? Is the game still funny to you? Are you still charmed by these moments between all these characters?
Well, I'll let Bill and JF add to it if they want to, but writing humor is one of the most challenging things there is to do, because you're right. If you're working on a project for a long time, you start hearing the same lines over and over, and you start wondering, are they funny or not? I think I worked with a group of amazing writers who just bounced off each other all the time, and going through the various stages of seeing it on the paper, then doing TTS, and then going into the actual voice actors, it never ever got old. And there are still jokes that today just make me laugh out loud.
When we started that project, she was very nervous because she was like, I don't know how to write humor and whatnot. But with the team she pulled together, they really managed to pull this off. And to be honest with you, to this day, there are some scenes that we're still laughing out loud and everything. And we go like, okay, if we still enjoy it, we feel like that there's something there that will be really fresh for players, and will be really, like Bill said, delightful.
And you know, it's like your favorite comedy. You can watch a movie over and over, and if it makes you laugh, it'll still make you laugh. So yeah, they in addition to the rock and roll, that's the one thing that the team really got was the game is fun and it's funny. And that's what you expect from the Guardians. You expect that Marvel blend of drama and intensity, and then someone cracks a joke. And that's part of the Marvel magic, and they nailed it.
And I mean, speaking of intensity, Jean-Francois, I'm really interested to know what the leap was like. Everyone obviously knows of Eidos Montreal as kind of being the Deus Ex studio, and you and Mary have both worked on Deus Ex. What was the leap like for you to create something that's so high? I mean, Deus Ex has its moments of high-octane gameplay, but, you know, you think of Adam Jensen as, like, skulking in the shadows, whereas with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, it's the completely other end of the spectrum. You are firing your blasters, you're jumping all over the place, but you're also kind of micromanaging the rest of the Guardians in a way. So what was the leap like to implementing that?
Working on the previous games, like you mentioned, you go and read like philosophy, and when you start to work on Guardians of the Galaxy, you go bungee jumping. And that's the kind of leap in your head that you have to go for. It was for us. It was truly exciting, because anything like when we were working on Deus Ex or past titles in our careers, like one of the first thing that goes through my mind when I'm presented a potential project is, can I fall in love with this? Yes or no? And if I can fall in love with it, and if I feel like the material, there's so much richness to be explored, then I will get excited. And I would say on top of that is, so it's kind of the first step. And early on, when we knew that this was to happen, we flew to LA and meet Bill and his team and everything. And we had a great discussion that lasted for probably a couple of hours, because like any collaboration, until you're together, you never know what their intentions are, what is your sandbox, and things like that. And very early on, we discovered that Bill and his team at Marvel Games, like they were fully excited. They said, we brought you on board for what you're able to do, not for what us we are. We want you to bring your own flavor into our own identity. And that was exciting because we saw that we had quite some freedom and to test that, because like we have this initial meeting, right? And we exchanged those wishes. And we started to work and brainstorm in Montreal. And the first iterations of the characters that we did, like we said, we'll put it to 11 and we'll push those characters. And Bill and his team, they flew to Montreal and we sat them on our couch. And maybe it was a few seconds, but for me it lasted minutes in my head. Like Bill was like this, and me in my head, I was like, oh my God, we're dying. They're going to kill us and everything. But no, actually what we did was too much. But they fully appreciated that we were trying to bring something to the table. And after that, we just worked together to refine to the looks that you're seeing today. So it's quite exciting for us, because sometimes people speak, but do they mean what they say? And on both ends, I think we matched that, and we were very happy with that, and it was quite a journey.
And you're right, Jeff, if I can just jump on and say, throughout Marvel's history, that's the secret. You know, when you look at the history of Marvel Comics, for example, there are famous runs that readers love. And you say, you say Frank Miller's Daredevil, Walt Simonson's Thor, John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four. It's yes, they're Marvel characters, but when the creators come and they have a vision and they bring themselves to the character and they present the character in a new, fresh way that's revolutionary and interesting, we love that. So that's our philosophy, and we want them to bring themselves and do their versions. It's their vision and their versions of the Guardians. But still, what JF said about bungee jumping, JF and Mary, they bungee jumped. See those books right behind Mary, those Marvel books? They bungee jumped into those. They did, and they came back and presented their vision and their story. And you'll see in the game, it is just packed with, I won't even call them Easter eggs. They're building blocks. They're Marvel DNA. Characters, locations, moments, images, sounds. It all comes organically and authentically from the source material. And it's a love letter. It's a love letter to the characters that is authentic and true to the history, but still fresh and new in creating a modern experience.
No higher praise than that. I was going to ask, obviously, you're playing through the game as Star-Lord, but you have the group to think of. You have those dynamics. I noticed, there's a point in the gameplay where Drax throws Rocket over some sort of gorge, and there's this, kind of devastating, Rocket is mad at you because you did this. What's it like sort of balancing those group dynamics, making sure that everyone gets their fair say, everyone gets the right amount of screen time, but without it becoming overbearing, because too many cooks, too many guardians yelling at you to do the right thing, I suppose. So how do you keep that balanced?
Well, I think the way we do it is you start with, I start obviously with the story, and we know that we're writing an ensemble storyline because, yes, Star-Lord is a central character, and everything that happens in the game is through his eyes. He's at the center of every decision that has to be made, and he's really experiencing the other characters, these unique, wild, misfits who have very strong personalities of their own. And so finding the balance between making sure that all of those characters have their screen time, have their moments together, you kind of just look at it through the eyes of Star-Lord, and you start, it all starts kind of falling into place. At least that's how it felt for me, ensuring that every character has their own moments, their own arcs, and yet because you're Star-Lord at the center, you're controlling it, and you get to make the choices in those moments to talk to various characters or to chime in on their conversations. And they go in different ways as a result. And all of it just comes into this great infused center focus on you are Star-Lord and you are hanging out with these amazing characters. and having really, really deep, meaningful, yet funny conversations with them, along with all the gameplay and the battles and the stuff that you're leading them through.
Just to say, to complete with what Mary just said from a story perspective, but also from an experience perspective, like being Star-Lord, like this fantasy of being one of the Guardians and being surrounded by Gamora, Drax, Groot, and Rocket almost at any given time. Like, it was also in gameplay the same thing, like creating scenarios in which like the different characters would have key roles to play, or the way you play and the decisions you make can affect them and how they're going to react to certain events, and will force you to readapt afterwards. And that was also a central piece of the experience that we were figuring out for the last few years.
Awesome. And I was going to ask, because, I mean, first of all, the game is coming out way sooner than I assumed. Like, I mean, I suppose maybe I'm just used to the, you know, we'll show it at E3 and you'll get it next year. So it's coming out October 26th. Yeah. Single player, coming out for kind of current gen and last gen too. So I think,
yes,
you know, you've obviously been working on this game for such a long amount of time. I've got to ask, is it kind of a self-contained story? Is it the beginning of, you know, hopefully way more Guardians stories to come? I can see an eyebrow twitching there, Bill. But what's the future? Are you hoping that this is going to be the next big, huge franchise from Eidos?
I'll say this, in true Marvel fashion, Eidos Montreal has presented an experience that if you're a huge Marvel fan or a huge Guardians fan, you're going to really love the deep dive. If you're new to the Guardians, it's just going to be really fun and an awesome experience because they're so good at what they do. You don't need to know anything going into it. Everything is laid out. Everything is introduced. You understand all the relationships and who everyone is. I would say it is a complete story, self-contained adventure. But, you know, however, in true Marvel style, it also sets up some awesome story threads. So who can say what the future will hold? But you're going to get a full, complete experience when you play this game.
And like I said, it's out in October. So one final quick question before we go. There's a lot of licensed music in this, and obviously music is a huge part of the Guardians. Is that going to come out as a soundtrack? Because already you've got Holding Out for Hero, you've got Bad Reputation, you've got me on board already. I mean, how many more bangers are on that soundtrack, I have to ask? And what was the process like in choosing them, just very quickly?
Yeah. I think one of the main things, like Bill was saying earlier on, the Guardians are kind of rock and roll misfits, and Peter is a kid from Earth, and he grew up in the 80s, and a lot of the pop culture back in that time, like, it's what influenced him. And when he was kidnapped and was taken in the cosmic universe and everything, his point of reference is still back in the 80s and everything. So we started with our audio director and with Marvel and talk about like the songs that we would love to have. We build a list and we try to be eclectic to really capture the vibe, like not just go into pop or just in rock and roll. Like we mix a lot of these things together to try to have a broad scope of like Peter, all the things he loved back then, and he brought him with him in the Guardians of the Galaxy world that we created. And so it was a very fun process, or just going back to the memory lane. You know, sometimes you're at home at night and you just go through the old video clips of MTV and things like that, and you go, oh yeah, that was good. And after that, it was also a question that the lyrics needed to speak to the events of the game. Like, it's not just the song for the effect of the song, it needs also to speak to the emotional curves that we're exploring. And today I'm not going to go that much in detail, but you have seen a teaser in the presentation today where the music will play a role in gameplay, and we call it the huddle. And when you're on the battlefield and you're fighting enemies, at some point, like, you have a token that builds up that at some point you can use, and that is based on some of the songs that Peter knows to try to pump his team. So we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail down the road, but we wanted to infuse the music also into the gameplay experience. And like Bill teases, is that there's more to the music that we're not talking today that will come soon.
Wonderful. Well, Bill, Jean-Francois, and Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. And like I said, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is out October 26th. And for more from this year's E3 and, of course, Play for All, make sure you stay tuned to GameSpot. Welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2021. We just had my interview with the team behind Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy there. One of my standouts from this year's E3, honestly. I think there have been rumors about this game for years, and it was just nice to see it in action, incorporating, I don't know, like sort of the choice-based stuff that you've seen in things like Deus Ex, as well as like little Telltale-esque segments, you know, like Rocket will remember this. So I'm psyched for that one coming out in October. We'll have the full VOD up on our YouTube channel very soon. Tam and Persia, welcome back.
Hello.
And next,
put two fingers up there.
why did you do the Richard Nixon? Like, I am not a crook.
I am not a crook.
Coming up next, Jordan is going to be speaking with the devs behind Knockout City, which is a fun game that Tam and I have been playing quite a lot of recently, haven't we, Tam?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game that we're going to be playing with the Kind of Funny crew as well next week.
Yeah, as part of our charity live streams. So we'll be playing that on, I believe it's Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday 2 till 4 p.m. PT. It'll be Tam, myself, Greg Miller, Snowbike Mike, Blessing Adeoye Jr., and some other special guests, whoever we can rope on to help us raise money for able gamers. tinyurl.com/playforall2021. The donation page is live, but we'll be doing all our big charity streams next week. Persia, have you been playing any Knockout City?
I have. You know, it's oddly competitive. I was like, oh, a cute dodgeball game. Let's go. And then game one, I'm like, all right, we got the strats. I'm passing you the ball, and then we're going around. Yeah, pretty good.
It is a lot of fun, and to find out more, Jordan is going to be talking with two of the folks from VLAN Studios to find out all about the creation of this game.
What's up, everyone? I'm Jordan Rameh, and I'm joined by Guha and Karthik Bala, the two brothers at the helm of VLAN Studios, the developer behind Knockout City, which, if you're anything like me, has kind of been dominating your life for the past couple of weeks. Thank you both for joining me today. This is awesome.
Thanks for having us, Jordan. Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
All right, Guha, I'm going to come to you first. So for the uninitiated, what is Knockout City? Like, brief overview, what is it?
So Knockout City is a new team-based action game, competitive multiplayer game. It's a world where all scores are settled with epic dodgeball battles. It's about throwing and catching, it's about face-offs, it's about teamwork. So get your team game on, get into the action.
Nah, not teamwork. I want to dominate. I want to lead that leaderboard. I got a really awesome MVP pose. I want to see it at the end of every single match. You guys have a lot of cool cosmetics in this game.
Awesome. Yeah. There's a lot of content in the game. I mean, even as you progress through the street rank progression, there's like 900 tiers built into the game. So there's just a ton of content, and it's awesome to see where players are at in the community. But the really cool stuff, nobody's unlocked yet. So it's cool right now, but the really cool stuff is still more to go.
You know, when we started developing Knockout City, it wasn't developed as like a paper concept or anything like that. We started playing with different prototypes about what it would be like to throw and catch a ball, a different kind of action game. You know, many of our really good friends make action games with guns in them, so we said, hey, can we do something different? And so this game, we found the fun
in throwing and catching and all the dynamics that it opens up. But when you write it on paper, it's like,